Hey everyone, thanks for joining this week's episode of Soundbites. But before we get started, I want to do a little housekeeping. So I made a mistake. When we started recording this, as soon as I hit record, I managed to flip Jacqueline's microphone over from the one she was using to the one that was built into her laptop. And didn't really realize it until we got to production here. So, not the end of the world, just the audio isn't as great as I normally would have liked it. It's my fault, but the story is still really good. Really interesting background, and we wanted to keep that and preserve that versus trying to re-record it and recapture it. So, really good episode. Really excited for y'all to hear it. And without any more babbling, I'll switch over to the episode now. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoy.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Soundbites. If this is your first time listening, we talk about all things business, innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and strategy. And today on the pod, we have Jacklyn Phillips. Jacklyn is a registered vet tech and owner of Action Vet Tech Services, a company that helps veterinary hospitals and clinics overcome staffing shortages, educational hurdles, and business challenges. So welcome, Jacklyn. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to chat with you. Where we typically like to kick off our episode is really just tell us what got you here. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from.
Yeah, that's big. Because it's a reality of it's been 20 years.
Yeah, I know. How do you sum that up in a few minutes?
I know. Yeah. And it ages me, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. 20 years is a lot, right? So
Yeah.
I guess if I'm starting like from maybe like high school, like right out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I will say I knew that I kind of wanted to do something for myself. I went to massage therapy school, and I was always interested in like holistics and naturopathic healing. And I thought I could work for myself and make money and maybe travel. And it sounded like an independent job that I could do with something that I was definitely interested in. I don't think I had the maturity at that time, at like 19 to really take that.
Few people do.
Yeah, to really take that path seriously or like build myself in a business or it just wasn't for me. Yes, I graduated and I worked for a high-end salon and spa for about 3 months. And that was it. And then I got into the way I got into veterinary medicine was my aunt's veterinarian who had a large equine business, needed somebody that knew how to handle a horse. And I grew up with horses. I grew up showing horses. So I had the handling, I had the horsemanship. So I got a job with him. He also had a small animal, so dogs and cats as well. And yeah, that was how I got into it. So I worked as an assistant for about, I worked for him for about a year and a half. And then I moved to Florida. It was just kind of random again, like 19, early 20s. The guy that I was dating at the time wanted to go to school down there and needed somebody to share the rent. I'm like, let's go. So, and I got a job in a small animal hospital there. I lived in Tennessee after that, and I worked in a small animal hospital there as well. And honestly, that was where it kind of kicked me into going to school, because at that particular hospital, assistants are often, trained on the job to do a lot of things. But at that particular hospital in Tennessee, they did not allow assistants to run anesthesia. So only licensed technicians were allowed to do that. And I was doing that in previous jobs. So I was like, I'm going to school. So I then moved to Ohio, kind of like map on a dartboard. My family's in Indiana.
Ohio, huh? Okay.
I know. Yeah. The armpit of America. Maybe cut that out. My family's in Indiana, so it was like somewhat, close to them too. So I went to school during the day and I worked at an emergency clinic at night. So that was how I got into emergency, which I loved. I mean, it was like, you never really know what's coming through the door. You see a lot of different cases. I really that's where I say I grew up in the veterinary space again, like early 20s. I was, learning a lot. I was there for 7 years, nearly. So even after school, so I, advanced into more senior roles in that hospital. So it was a great place to grow. And I loved emergency. I always wanted to be in academia. So kind of a space where it felt like best of the best, like doctors and medicine and best patient care. So I ended up in North Carolina. NC State has one of the best vet schools in the country. I always kind of wanted to be in North Carolina. We grew up going to the Outer Banks camping when I was a kid. I had a friend that lived near the mountains. It's a great place to be. So, long story short on that, I did get a job at NC State. I was the emergency supervisor there for 3 years. It was not my forever home, as I hoped for. Honestly, I burned out of the clinical side, working nights, weekends, holidays. Being a supervisor, I had a dual role of, working on the floor with the technicians, with patient care, which was important to me, as well as, being a manager on that side.
That's a lot. I can imagine the burnout, right? Especially, and it's unfortunate when it's at a place that you aspired to be and wanted to be, but sometimes that leads into like really good, exciting new opportunities. And is that how, Action Vet Tech Services was formed?
Not quite.
A little more?
Not quite. So leaving clinical space, and it's also should be said that veterinary technicians don't make a lot of money. So it was also kind of the reality of like, I'm kind of paycheck to paycheck, very minimal on the savings side. I needed more money. So I went into sales and I did medical device. So there's a sterilizer company in the Chapel Hill area that manufactures low temperature sterilizers. And I think probably 75% of their business is veterinarians. So you might know of an autoclave, which is a high temperature sterilization for instruments. So this was a low temperature sterilization for things that can't sustain that heat. And they also had needs for education on this equipment too. So it was a great job. I was there for 2.5 years. I was their top salesperson the whole time I was there. I did enjoy it. It's a great company, but I also was bored. Like, yes, I was earning a great salary and I was saving money, but I missed patient care. I missed being in the clinical space, and I met someone that had a startup company doing endoscopy, minimally invasive procedures. So he was refurbishing equipment from the human side and selling to veterinarians, and also teaching the instrumentation to veterinarians. He had been in business for about 5 years, and I begged him for a job for like 6 months, and then we worked something out. It was like kind of a 6-month contract. I was his first employee. We just kind of, he had financial goals and things that he wanted to do in his business, and I felt like it would be a nice mix of being in sales, like being able to make money, as well as back in a clinical space where I'm with the patient, helping doctors, helping technicians with this technology. And it was very innovative in that way too, because not a lot of laparoscopy is happening in veterinary medicine. So that was like 6 months and did exceed our financial goals, and it was great and good, but paths took different ways. And then I was without a job for the first time in my adult life.
How did that feel?
Honestly, I had a nice commission check. So, financially I was okay, but then it was kind of like, what do I do? Is this where people go travel the world? Is this,
It's my eat, pray, love moment, or
seriously, that's kind of where I was at. It's like, is this how this works out? So I was comfortable I was okay just being without a job, but I also knew that I needed to do something. Like, I've not ever been without a job. So then I had connections networked through, I've been in North Carolina for 12 years now, in clinics that needed technicians and that had previously asked me, like, hey, you should come fill some shifts here. And so I reached back out to them. And I did just start filling in shifts. And then I also thought, well, I'm forever a veterinary technician. I'm licensed. I keep up with my continuing education to keep my license. And then there was the SPCA, the Saving Lives Spay Neuter Clinic, that they had closed for a period of time, and then they had a new doctor. So the building was completely empty. The new doctor was building it from the ground up. She needed a licensed technician. I was like, I will help you build this. She wanted to hire me, as the full-time employee. I was like, no, I'm, kind of doing this thing on my own. And that was also where I did create an LLC to be a contractor. And that's kind of what we worked out. Like, they paid me the fees that I charged, and I helped her build that from the ground up. I also helped her find her permanent employee. So that was very rewarding, but I was also filling shifts other places. So in that story is where Action Vet Techs was kind of formed, because with the LLC, I had to create a business name, and I had to have a contract as well, just on the legalities of both sides. So that's where that was formed. And then there was far more demands than supply of myself.
Sure.
Yes.
You're only one person, so you're like, there's only so much I can do in a day, in a week.
It was not, it was all word of mouth on me. Yes, I had business cards, and I utilized my networks on, this is what I'm doing. But I didn't really have a direction. I was just doing it for myself. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to do something I was passionate about, and create my own schedule. And I like working in different teams. I like working in different hospitals. I think my emergency background kind of helps me adapt in those ways, just, being a part of chaos and constantly having to, adapt to every situation.
Well,
think about it.
Go ahead, Derek.
I was just saying that all the path along your way, you've been basically collecting all these skills that made you uniquely positioned at each step and each time an opportunity came up, right? When your friend was starting the sterilization company, you had your history in animal healthcare, and you're a registered vet tech. You had already run in management. You knew how these kind of things operated and worked. You had worked in the sales of equipment before. So you had all those pieces, all those tools already available to you. So when that opportunity presented itself, you were uniquely positioned to capitalize on it. And then when the next opportunity came, same story. You had this unique collection of skills that made you specifically positioned to be able to capitalize on that at the right time. It's kind of an interesting path, the way it worked out for you.
It is. And that's, what I say about my path. Like, everything I did kind of led me exactly where I am. And I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be.
For people who maybe aren't familiar with what a vet tech does, can you explain what that is and maybe what makes their role, unique or different in the veterinary space?
Yeah. If we compare it to like human nursing side, a veterinary technician has similar roles as far as the intake of the patient, collecting vitals, collecting a patient history, as well as drawing blood, placing catheters. In addition, what makes veterinary technicians unique is that we also run anesthesia. We're in charge of keeping that patient under anesthesia so the doctor can perform surgery and procedures. We do radiology, so we're taking x-rays. We perform dental cleanings. There's ICU patient treatments and more advanced catheterization. There's so many layers of what a technician does. So that would be maybe a differentiating factor compared to like human nursing that people may not realize. But we also have to consider that we need to know several different species and what those vitals are and what those considerations are and different contraindications and medications or procedures that we're doing.
Yeah, that's tricky. I think people wouldn't even think about that the biology of a horse, a dog, a cat, reptiles, like birds, all these things are so vastly different, and making a mistake on one not only could be problematic but fatal, right?
Yes.
Mixing something up.
Yes.
So the stakes are extremely elevated. No, that's really fascinating. So when you were coming through all these different evolutions of your career, which aspects did you really enjoy the most besides working with the animals? I think that's one of your very clearly your passion. What aspects were the most interesting to you? What part of the problem solving was most interesting?
Like in doing the relief work, like I've being temporary in each hospital.
That too, but also like the management challenges you might have faced, or what pieces of your path really stood out to you as being transformational.
I think being a manager for sure is very difficult. You know, managing people is ultimately managing behaviors and you know,
and personalities and everything that goes with it.
Yeah. So I did take a course when I was working at NC State on performance leadership, which was super helpful in understanding interpersonal communication, different personality types, team building, conflict resolution, and the tools to do that, to build a solid team. And it helped me grow myself. I learned a lot about myself in those things. You know, we did Myers-Briggs and a lot of those things. And I think what I learned as a manager was it's my job to adapt to each of my team members, not them to adapt to my personality or my ways. So that was a growth opportunity for me too, that I learned a lot about myself. Otherwise, working as a relief technician, I liked the challenges of working in different teams. Yes, patient care is pretty streamlined. Like I know patient care, like we know what to do when a patient comes in and what their needs are. But every hospital functions a little different. Every doctor has different preferences on what they want. So that was a constant learning for me and a challenge for me that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed working with different personalities as well, learning from them.
Do you remember what your Myers-Briggs 4-letter personality is?
Yeah. Yep. ESTP.
Which one? EFTP. I'm trying to remember which
ES.
Which person? ES.
So extrovert, sensing, trusting, and what is the P?
I don't remember.
Perceiving. Might be perceiving.
Okay, so the persona type for the ESTP is the entrepreneur.
There you go.
Yeah, which is pretty on point. As comparison, Lauren and I are both ENFJ. We fall under the protagonist, so we do battle with each other every now and again. But that's interesting. It's pretty fascinating that you fall into the entrepreneur bucket. That's cool.
I was the only one in the performance leadership course. I was the only one of that specific type. Like there were like
very
20, 20, there was 20 in our class, I think. And I was the only one of that exact type.
But it's telling that, you doing just one thing wouldn't fit that personality type. You needing to have new challenges, you needing to be able to seek and grow these new opportunities are pretty fascinating. So you have a lot of unique challenges in your space. And I think like when people think of vet techs, a lot of people don't realize it's not just in the veterinary hospital. It's not Banfield just at the street, but like people like Pfizer, Thermo Fisher, like big companies
Yeah.
like this. All the pharmaceutical companies would require that skill set. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities. So that leads to your team now. You have a really interesting role where that space always has opportunities to fill a bunch of different types of roles, whether it's emergency veterinary medicine, whether it's some of these clinical spaces or education spaces. Your team is versatile enough to be able to fill those gaps almost at a moment's notice and hit the ground running, right? Without having to have a spool up process.
Yes. And honestly, I think that is kind of definitely one of the challenges of expressing that value to our potential accounts, because not every technician is cut from the same cloth. Sure, if we all went to school, we all took a national board exam, but our on-the-job experience is really what molds us into, our potential. And so when I'm recruiting or, interviewing for technicians to do this type of work, I'm looking for that diversity. The practices that you've worked in, if they have a specialty in emergency, I'm not saying emergency because I'm partial to it, because that's my background, but I know what emergency, the exposure that you've had and, the adaptability that you have to have and the communication skills and how dependent the doctors are on technicians versus someone that's maybe only worked in a general practice. General practices are so variable in how they utilize their technicians. A lot of times they're underutilized.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So to your point, having a diverse skill set, so you don't just have 4 people identical to you or 3 people identical to prototype A. You have a really diverse set. So when a client says, we need X, we need Y, we need Z, it's like, oh, we have that puzzle piece. We can deploy it rapidly. There's not a big training spool up, and they can start extracting value immediately, no matter what their needs are.
Yes. Yep. Because there was a lot of questions of, well, don't they need training? It's like, sure, we need to know where your stuff is and we need to know what your preferences are. But as far as how to take care of that patient, we know patient care. And I'm confident in that. And, it's like, give us a go and you can tell me what doesn't work. And it's been a success.
Is that one of your clients' biggest objections? Is that they are concerned about the training or how someone can quickly fit in? What sort of pushback do you receive, and then how do you overcome some of those objections?
I think pricing is the biggest kickback that I might get, because as a temporary agency, we're charging more than your highest paid technician makes as a full-time employee. Yes. Because we're not receiving your benefits. We're not your employee. So, advocating for the value of these technicians is really where I've had to push on that. Like we're worth this. And once they have us in there, they know. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, get us in the door and you'll see what this is for you. We can often do the job of 2 technicians. And that has, we've kind of had to earn it in that way.
Yeah. Because of that diverse experience set, when you get in, you've seen so many different problems, and because you've worked with so many different other organizations, you're able to collect a lot of best practices and even probably deliver those best practices back to the organization you're working with in some instances, right?
Right. Yeah. And I'm confident about it. I worked myself in nearly 30 clinics in that first year and a half. So I know that it works, and I know that it will work.
When you're working with 30 different clinics, do you mentally catalog, okay, this is what these are best practices. This is the stuff that I've seen that's kind of a disaster. Does that just like automatically boil out to the top now? It's like, those magic eye pictures that are kind of all scrambly, but if you look at it the right way, it just pops right out at you. Are you like being able to see the matrix these days?
Yes and no. I don't know. I'm just kind of like for a forward motion type. I mean, I definitely, I think it was just exactly that. Like the motivation was proving that this works. There's a lot of veterinarian companies, relief veterinarian companies. So that has integrated really well, but there's not technician companies that are doing this. And that's kind of where I pulled the business model from, was, reaching out to existing veterinarian companies that are doing this, and what is their business model and how does that work? But still, again, like doctors are a little more cookie cutter on what you get, right? They have a very specific job to diagnose, prescribe, treat, do surgery. Technicians have to know front to back on how the hospital operates. And so, yeah, like to be able to prove that it works was definitely the motivation.
What is the number one mechanism for obtaining new customer base? Is it still word of mouth?
Yeah, largely, yes. I just brought on marketing or social media. Like, we need a social media presence, and it's a hard pass for me on marketing. I have zero interest in it. I don't want to learn it. I don't want to do it. But I understand that it's necessary. But yeah, word of mouth has been our biggest business builder, and we love that. A lot of hospitals are corporately owned now. So if I get into a practice that has a corporation that owns several hospitals in the area, the managers are often just passing our company name along to other managers that need the same help.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And when you're doing that level of growth, like what's keeping you up at night currently?
I'm pretty low stress. I feel like anything that I do, like to think about, to keep me up at night is not going to contribute to success.
It's not productive.
So there's no sense in worrying. I think about, I guess what maybe keeps me up is the growth, like what's next, and consistently thinking about, expanding into other states, duplicating myself, right? So that we can grow. And how is that done? So if anything keeps me up, it's that, like the what's next part.
You mentioned at NC State, there was some burnout there, probably for a few reasons, but one of your biggest challenges was really management. And now you own a business, I think, with like 30 plus people, right? So you're kind of throwing yourself back into an environment where you are in charge. Does it feel different because it's your own business, or did you take a lot of learnings from your NC State experience, your other experiences, and refined how you approach it there? Like how is it different this time around?
Yeah. And I joke about that with my business counselor, because when I started, I'm like, I don't want to manage people. I wanted to do this for myself and manage myself. But here I am 35 employees later. I think the difference is that this business model and the culture that I've created with this is that these employees work independently. I respect them as mature professionals. I post shifts on take it or leave it. You choose your schedule. You choose when you work. I don't make your schedule. I have high expectations on work ethic and being on time and, not calling out of these shifts. Like, you have to be committed. So my standards are there, from a management perspective, but I'm also letting them do what they want. The whole point of this was, I enjoyed this work, and I wanted to share that with other technicians as an alternate career path to keep them in the industry. because so many technicians like myself who have been in the game for so long, like we're burning out, but we're still passionate about the patient care and doing the work that we do. So I think this has really preserved technicians to have this path. Like some of my technicians, they maybe work in a different industry full time, but they do this on the side, again, because that's what they want to do. Maybe they need a little extra cash, and they enjoy the work. So that's what makes it different, I think, is that I'm allowing them to be in control of themselves.
Sounds like you give them a lot of autonomy, which is something that you wanted, but then maybe weren't getting in some other roles. So I think that's great. What do you think there's like a higher instance of burnout in your industry relative to maybe some other fields, or is that just the medical field in general?
I think it's probably the medical field in general. There's constant conversation about like mental health and burnout in our industry for sure. It's hard work, and we're underpaid. We're, understaffed, a lot of times. During COVID was a big influx of, people obtaining more pets, or people being with their pets and realizing, oh, we haven't been to the vet in 5 years, Wow. So I know there was a huge influx of patient needs during that time as well.
This is kind of away from the management aspect of it, but do you all find it difficult to not become emotionally attached to the patients that you have? I feel like it'd be harder when you're working with animals versus humans. Like I can almost detach, like separate the human aspect of it, but a dog in front of you. How do you manage to get away from that emotional attachment?
Of course. Yeah, there's a lot of compassion, and there is also compassion fatigue, where, I can think of ER shifts working on Christmas Day where I had to take bodies to the freezer 9 times in a 10-hour shift, where there's euthanasia or there's trauma that a patient died at home, or, there's a lot of things, especially, working in emergency. I think that there is a emotional, maybe a block that is kind of put up when you go into work, where you are going to see that more commonly. It doesn't take away from the compassion necessarily, but it's also kind of the matter of fact of this is what this patient needs, and these are the steps that we're taking to help them. But there's emotional attachment, and there's hard days. And I think that contributes to some of our burnout too. If we get clients or patients in that can be helped, and there's a financial restriction that we can't fix them because there's no money, and then we have to euthanize. And that's hard.
Yeah. I have a family friend who, I won't say who she worked for, but she works for a very large medical firm, and she's a vet tech. And she was working in a lab facility, and it was specific with some of the animal testing. And she said that was difficult because of the activity that they had to perform, and you had to give all of them basically a number. And when they'd come up and like lick your hand, you had to mentally block this. So it was a really challenge, and she had to like overcome that by thinking, okay, the greater good is, the ultimate goal is this. This is pushing towards the ultimate goal. So I can see how that level of fatigue would just wear on you from time to time.
Lab animal and research, where that patient is ultimately an object.
That's I don't know if I could do that.
I couldn't do it.
That's tough.
Yeah, I couldn't do the lab animal side or the research side, I don't think.
So what does the future look like for you and your industry right now? We want to grow. Are you mostly in North Carolina right now and you want to expand?
Yeah, we're mostly in North Carolina. We cover all the state for the staffing side. Majority of our technicians reside in like Raleigh, Durham, Triangle area, outskirts. I have a territory in Charlotte. There's about 9 technicians that are there. It's been a hard part of doing business outside of the state. I receive requests from all over the country. We need staff. And I wish I could help all of them, but I don't have the staff residing in those areas to do it. And, even if I have a technician that can travel and maybe go spend a couple weeks or whatever they need, often the expense is the struggle there. But on the education side, so we're doing a lot of continuing education. So we'll bring conference level CE in-house, or we'll send one of my technicians to work on the floor with the team and teach them, hands-on, like directly on the job. And we've done that all over the country. We've been to Texas, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Virginia to do those kind of things. So the next would be, expanding into other states, creating territories, same as we've done here, to be able to accommodate the same type of business.
And having that CE sort of in their facility, I'm assuming it's helpful because it's less of an interruption to their schedules. They don't have to travel. They don't have to take time out. They can actually go to work and get that CE right on site.
Sure. As well as the other staff being a part of it too. So when we send people to conferences, it's the licensed techs and the veterinarians, right? Because they need those CE credits. But what about the support staff, the assistants? Like, where are they receiving education? So if we can bring it in-house, yes, their veterinarians and their technicians can receive their CE credit and get the education, but their support staff can also be a part of that. So I think it's a, kind of a win-win on that. We do a lot of CPR training.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 questions that we'd like to ask at the end of every episode are, if you could, and we warn you, we like to warn people, we like to give people a heads up, but if you could have dinner with your 18-year-old or 25-year-old self, you get to pick, knowing what you know about your journey, what advice would you give 18 or 25-year-old version of you?
I think whatever advice I were to give, I wouldn't have listened. So there's that. Honestly, I don't know. I think like every mistake was a lesson. Everything that I did in my path was where it brought me here. Right. So I don't know that I would say hey, don't do this, or give any necessary advice, because I'm pretty proud of my path. And I was, pretty reckless in that time frame. But also here I am.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one. And what's really fun about that question is we haven't really gotten the same answer twice. We get themes that kind of come through it.
Yeah.
We love that because we have never really gotten the same answer exactly twice. So that's good. And when we connect the dots of your journey, you see every step along the way gave you a skill set that led to an opportunity to utilize that skill set, which gave you a new one, which led to an opportunity. So you've had a really, really interesting path that you've been able to exploit all those opportunities at. And your Myers-Briggs score would suggest that makes sense, right?
I guess so.
So aside from that, what books, podcasts, and media are you listening to these days?
Oh man, I'm kind of a seasonal reader. The last book that I read was Chatter, and that was written by a psychologist, kind of about the conversations going on in our heads, right? That self-talk or that inner dialogue, and how that's relating to our day-to-day. Another book that I love is The Untethered Soul. I've read that book 3 times. Very similar, but a little more maybe on the spiritual side, but also about that inner dialogue. I love Joe Dispenza, so you can kind of see a trend here on psychology and the power of thought in that way of his book Becoming Supernatural. Again, just that neural network of our thoughts can create so much for us, and I believe in that. Podcasts. I'm a big YouTuber, so I joke and I say YouTube is college. You can learn so much, but I love health and mindfulness and longevity. So Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Joe Rogan always. I just love Joe Rogan. He's so wide open and curious and has a lot of great conversations with a lot of great people. on the health side too. So yeah, those are people that I follow.
No, I was going to ask, what do you like to do when you're not working? I know I see like some health and wellness themes. What's taking up your time when you're not thinking about work?
Yeah, I love the gym. It's a playground, so I'm there. It's nice that I can kind of break up my day, and that way I usually go around 1 o'clock, and that's my break in the day. I love being outdoors. I'm on the lake. I have a bicycle that I ride. I have a dog. We hike. So very much active in my downtime. I love yoga too. So it's nice to check out classes.
So the most important question is, what kind of dog?
She's kind of a mutt. I adopted her as an adult from a rescue group about 5 years ago. Probably a pity mix.
Oh,
but I didn't do any kind of DNA testing or anything. She's perfect.
We rescued we call her a boxable because she's like pit bull boxer mixed,
Yeah.
but we got her from like the Carolina boxer rescue.
Yeah.
Like someone got her as a puppy and abandoned her at 5.
Aww.
Like, it's so weird to have a dog for like 5 years, and like she's pretty cool and weird. And then I guess the very last question is, what else has your attention? Like, what, you have a lot of health and wellness theme, a lot of outdoors theme, you have a lot of action and activity in your life, but what are there any other areas where things are popping into your attention recently?
Not that you don't have enough going on, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean, the business stuff is consistently circulating on like where we can branch out to. I think something else I thought about recently was maybe home health care for patients. And even early on, I thought about that. You know, there's same kind of issues with that humans have, that they need like nursing care in the home. People that own animals with like diabetes, or maybe they had an orthopedic surgery and they can't get them in and out, or they need this maintenance of checking their glucose or checking their blood pressure. You know, could there be an opportunity of working with clinics like the doctors that need a technician that's able to do these things? That patient doesn't do well in the hospital or would require several visits. Could we do something like that?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great idea. And I think that brings us to a really good conclusion point. So, Jacklyn, this has been a lot of fun hearing about your industry, hearing about your path and journey to get there, seeing how you've taken those opportunities along the way, hearing about your interests and your puppy. So we're really appreciative that you were able to join us, and we hope you can come back again sometime so we can get an update on where everything goes as you continue to grow, as you expand, and as you see more growth in different states.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Thanks, Jacklyn.
Thanks, Jacklyn.